Hello everyone and welcome back to another tutorial. My name is Divine and in today's video I'm going to show us how to cut and sew this beautiful baby dress with gathers. So if this is something you're interested in, let's get started. So I have 2 yards of my fabric here, I have 1 yard of my lining, and I have my hair stay for today's video. The first thing I'll do is to draft out the pattern for the upper part of my dress. And the first measurement I'll be getting is my chest line measurement of 7.5 inches and my half length of 14 inches. So this dress is a baby dress, so we're going to be drafting out a dart pattern. Next, I'm going to mark our shoulder measurement divided by 2, which is 6.75. I'll mark that out and connect the 2 points together. After which I'll mark my bust measurement divided by 4. I'm going to mark that on my chest line. Then I'll mark my round body measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch for dart. Like I said, this is going to be a dart pattern. After doing that, on the armhole line here, I'm going to come down with 1 inch for our shoulder slope. Then measure what I have left and divide it by 2. Now on that midpoint, I'll go in with ½ inch, then connect all these points together so I can get the curve for the front armhole. Next, I'm going to mark our nipple to nipple measurement, which is 3.5. I'll mark that out. Then I'll mark our dart length of 4 inches. So for an adult, it's going to be 5 inches and above, 5 inches or 6 inches. But for this baby dress, I'll be marking using 4 inches for the length of the dart. Then I'll mark ½ inch on both sides of this dart line. I'll mark ½ inch on both sides, then connect it to the 4 inches mark I made at the top. So with this now, when we sew this dart, our waist measurement is going to go back to the initial measurement. Next, I'm going to mark our neck width of 3.25 and a depth of 3 inches. I'll connect the 2 points together. Then I'm going to draw the shoulder slope, connecting from the neck width to the 1 inch we came down with. So this is our front pattern. Now for the back pattern, the first thing I'm going to do is to come down with 1 inch from the top of our pattern paper and get a straight line. So this straight line here is going to be our shoulder line. Then from the shoulder line, I'll come down with 7.5 inches to get our chest line. Sorry, 7.25 inches for the chest line. Then 14 inches for the half length. So because this is a sleeveless dress, we need to go up with ½ inch on this armhole side. Because this is a sleeveless dress, it's not going to be having a sleeve. So we need to go up with ½ inch so that it can have more coverage on the armpit area. And I'll connect that ½ inch to the midpoint of the armhole curve. Now for the back, I'm going to mark our shoulder measurement divided by 2. I'll mark the same point on the chest line, then connect the 2 points together. So this is our armhole line. Then from the center back, I'm going to go inwards with ½ inch on the waistline here. I'll go in with ½ inch and connect it to the shoulder line. So this helps to eliminate zipper bulge. And after which, I'm going to mark our round body measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch for the back dart, and I'll connect it. Then on the chest line, I'm going to mark the bust measurement divided by 4. I'll mark that. Then I'll connect the points together. Then I'll also be extending with ½ inch too, just like we did for the front, because this is a sleeveless dress. We need to go up from our actual armhole with ½ inch. Then on the armhole line here, I'm going to get the midpoint and connect that midpoint now to touch the ½ inch we went up with. So this is our new armhole curve. Next, I'm going to mark the neck width of 3.25. Then from that 3.25, I'm going to go up with 1 inch. And then from the 1 inch point, I'm going to connect to touch the shoulder tip, like so. Then on the shoulder line here, I'm going to come down with ½ inch. or the depth of the neckline. I'll connect this ½ inch now to touch the 1 inch we went up with, like so. So this is the neckline for the back. Then on the half length, I'm going to mark our nipple to nipple measurement, which is 3.5. Then go up with 4 inches for the length of the back dart. I'll draw a straight line. After which I'll mark ½ inch on both sides of this nipple to nipple line and connect it to touch the 4 inches length. So this is the legs of our dart. We are going to be sewing this on our fabric. So the last thing I would like to do here is to go up with ½ inch from the center back and connect it back to the side. This also helps to eliminate excesses at the back of our dress. And this is what we are having for the back draft and the front draft. One last thing I would like to do, because this is a sleeveless dress, on the shoulder slope here, I'm going to go inwards with 0.75 and connect it back to the midpoint. So because this is a sleeveless dress, if I was making this for an adult, I'm going to go in with 1 inch and connect back to the midpoint of the armhole. So we don't want the shoulder of our dress going all the way as if we want to attach a sleeve. So because this is sleeveless, we need to reduce the shoulder measurement with 1 inch for an adult, 0.75 for a baby. So the same thing I'll be working with at the back here. I'm going to go in with 0.75 and blend it back to touch the armhole curve. So this is what I'm having. This is the line I'm going to be working with. So I'm going to cut out our pattern now, and you can see where I'm cutting. So this is it for the front pattern. Then for the back, I'll cut out this excess here and this one also. And this is what we're having for the back and the front. Now I have 2 yards of my fabric here. I'm going to fold the 2 yards so we can cut out the lower part of our dress. Now I'm going to place my tape on the beginning of the dress at 14 inches. So 14 inches is the half length for the upper part. Now to get the length of the lower part, the gown full length is 37 inches. So I'll mark 37 inches here. And this dress has 2 layers. I want the second layer to be about 8 inches long. So I'll go up with 8 inches from that 37 and mark it. So when I measure what I'm having from the top here to this part, I'm having 15 inches. And when I measure what I have on the second layer, I'm having 8. Now to cut the upper layer, I'm going to be adding ½ inch seam allowance to the top and ½ inch to the bottom. So that means that 15 inches we have now will become 16 inches. So I'll mark at 16 inches. And by the time we sew ½ inch at the top and ½ inch at the bottom, we'll be left with the 15 inches we want initially. So I have 16 inches here. So I'll mark the wrong side of the fabric. I'll set it aside. Now for the second layer, which is 8 inches, I'm going to add ½ inch seam allowance at the top and 1.5 inches seam allowance at the bottom for rolling the hem of the dress. So that means I'm going to be cutting out a total of 10 inches for this second layer. So by the time we sew the upper part with ½ inch and roll the hem, the lower layer is going to return back to 8 inches. So this is the 10 inches. I will mark the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to open this up now. I'll open up the first layer. The first layer is longer than the second layer, as you can see. So the first thing I'm going to do is to place this lower layer on top of the upper layer, right sides facing each other. I'm going to join them back with the ½ inch seam allowance I added. Now to cut out the lining, I have 1 yard of my lining, but I won't be using the width of the lining. I'll be using the length, which is 16 inches to line in the dress. So I'm going to fold this 16 inches now into 4, then mark out a length of 20 inches. So I'll mark out 20 inches for the lining of the dress, so that the lower part I can use to line in the up of the dress. I'll cut it out. Then what I'm going to do on this lining is to open it up Then roll the hem of the lining. I'll fold it with half inch and fold again with another half inch and sew at the tip. Then on the upper part, I'm going to sew loose stitches at the upper part so we can draw out our gathers. So for our fabric here, I'm going to iron my stay on the fabric and iron a paper stay on the lining and pin my pattern to it and cut. I've cut out my pattern now and I added a seam allowance of half inch on the neck, the armhole, the lower parts and the shoulder, while on the side I added a seam allowance of 1.5 inches, and I've cut out the same thing for my lining. Then I'm going to notch the center point of our dart here, you can see, so we need to take note of it. And for the back, I added a seam allowance of 1.5 inches on the center back and on the side, and half inch around the other sides. So I'll also notch the center point of our dart on both the lining and the main fabric, and I'll also notch the zipper allowance. So this is what I'm having. So I'll take out my pins now, and this is what I'm having. The first thing I'm going to do is to map out our dart. The dart we have on our pattern, I'm going to draw it out on our fabric so that we can sew it. I'll follow the line I notched, and from there I'm going to mark 4.5 inches. Our dart length is 4 inches plus seam allowance at the lower part, that's 4.5. Then I'm going to fold it like so, then sew, following the lines I marked out. I'll do the same thing for my lining and for the second side of my front piece. And for the back piece also, I'll take out my pins and map out the dart for the back. I'll mark out 4.5 inches starting from where I notched, then half inch on both sides. I'll connect the point at the top of the dart. Then I'm going to fold it at the middle. I'll fold it over like so, then sew following the line there. So I'll do that for the lining and the main fabric. So this is what I have after doing that. I've done that for the main fabric and the lining. What I'll do next is to place the lining right side facing each other, then sew the neckline with half inch. So when sewing, we're going to use our hemming gum, so when we iron, it lays flat. And for the back piece also, I've sewn the dart. I'll place the lining right side facing each other on the fabric. I'll sew the neckline with half inch and sew the center back with 0.25. So this is the lower part of my dress. I've sewn the two layers together. I'm going to hem the lower part now with 1.5 inches. I'll roll it with half inch, then roll with 1 inch. And I'm rolling the shorter part, not the longer part. Then run gather stitches at the top. So this is what I have for the upper part of my blouse. I'll sew the lining down on the 3 sides with loose stitches. And for the back also, this is what I have. I'll turn it to the right side. Then I'm going to fall flat. So to fall flat, I'm going to arrange from the center back. I'll arrange the fabric and lining properly and sew at the tip. Arrange it properly, sew at the tip. Then sew the lower part and the side with loose stitches. So this is what I'm having. You can see everything lays nice and flat. So I'm going to be sewing the zipper side now with loose stitches. I'll mark 1.25 all the way and sew with loose stitches. After doing that, I've ironed my allowance and this is what I'm having for the back. Now to sew this to the front, I'm going to be opening the shoulder and place it fabric facing fabric, lining facing lining. I'll sew with half inch. I'll sew the other shoulder. Then I'm going to close up the sides using 1.5 inches seam allowance I added. So on the lower part of my dress now, I've drawn my loose stitches gathers on the waistline, gather stitch on the waistline. I'm going to be using my velvet fabric to tape this part that we joined on the midpoint here. So I've ironed my stay on my velvet fabric and I have a width of 1.25 inches. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to place it like so. So this is the right side of our fabric. I'll place it like so and sew with half inch. I'm placing it on the line, so the line there is the guide. Then I'm going to turn it over. I'll sew with half inch, turn it over, then turn in the edge there and sew at the tip. So we're going to be sewing this like a bias. And this is what I'm having after doing that. Next, I'm going to get the midpoint of this fabric on the waistline. I will notch the midpoint. Then I'm going to measure what I'm having on my blouse. I'll open it up. Then measure what I'm having from the midpoint of my blouse to the edge. I'll measure what I'm having. And whatever I'm having, I'm going to be drawing out my gathers from the midpoint that we notched to one edge to be the same thing we have on our blouse. So that by the time we are done drawing the gathers, it is equal with what we are having. So we can see what we're having here. I'll turn it over like so and pin the two midpoints together and sew all the way with 1/2 inch. So this is it after sewing. Next, I want to put the red velvet on the front of the dress. I'm going to get the midpoint and mark 1.5 inches on both sides of this midpoint. I'll get the midpoint on the neck too. I'll mark 1.5 inches on both sides of that midpoint. So we want the velvet to be 3 inches wide. Then I'll draw a straight line as a guide. So I'm not making this too visible so that it doesn't stain the fabric too much. Just make a little mark as a guide. I will extend the midpoint all the way down to the hem of the dress, then mark 1.5 inches on both sides. So I'll just draw the markings. Then after that, I'm going to cut out my velvet fabric of 4 inches wide. So we're working with 3 inches, but 1/2 inch sewing allowance on one side and on the other side, that's 4 inches. And please iron your hair stay on the velvet. It is a stretchy fabric, so the hair stay helps it to stay in place. I'll open up my dress like so. Then I'm going to pin this velvet fabric. I'll fold it in with 1/2 inch, then pin it. So we need to pin this. You cannot work with this without pinning. Then I'll fold it in on the other side and pin it. And on the lower parts, I'm going to trim out the excess. I'll fold it in with 1/2 inch and sew. I'll do the same thing for the upper part. So this is what I'm having after doing that. As you can see, this is the inside of the dress. Now I'm going to sew my zipper, and from the waistline here, I'm going to sew my zipper to 5 inches below the waistline. Then I'll sew what I have left with 1/2 inch. So I'll fix my zipper to 5 inches below the waistline, then close up the lower part of our dress. So to turn the armhole we're having here is 7 inches. I'm going to be turning this with a velvet fabric too, and I iron my hair stay on the velvet fabric. So the fabric should be longer than this. I'm just using this to show us. I have a width of 1.25 inches also. So I'll place the right side of the velvet fabric to face the lining of the dress. Then I'll sew with 1/2 inch all the way. After which I'll turn it over like so, fold in the excess allowance and sew. So we're using this velvet fabric to do like an outside piping. The right side of the velvet should touch the lining, sew with 1/2 inch, then turn it over, fold the remaining allowance and sew each round. So this is it. This is what I'm having. Our dress is coming out so well, guys. This is our zipper. Next, I want to sew the lining to the dress. I've drawn out my gathers on the lining. I folded the hem of my lining, and I've marked out the midpoint on my lining. So the midpoint of the lining should touch the midpoint of the dress. I'll turn my lining over like so, then pick the sewing allowance on the dress and 1/2 inch sewing allowance on the lining. I'm going to pin the two midpoints together first. After pinning it, I'm going to sew with 1/2 inch all the way. So because of the sewing of the velvet there, I'm going to sew a bit, then skip that part and continue sewing with 1/2 inch to the back. But we're not going to sew and climb the zipper allowance here because we're going to stop sewing before the zipper allowance. So this is what I'm having after sewing. This is it after sewing. You can see how neat it is. So to close up this remaining part of the lining, You can see I did not sew the zipper allowance of the lining and on the fabric. I'll turn my lining upwards. Then I'm going to hold the zipper allowance of the lining and also hold the zipper allowance of the lower part and twist my lining this way. So hold the zipper allowance of the lining and the zipper allowance of the lower part. Twist your lining this way. Twist it this way. Then sew with half inch. You can sew with half inch and you can sew climbing the allowance of the zipper. But make sure you don't climb the teeth of the zipper. If not, your zipper is going to get spoiled. So I'll do the same thing here. Hold the zipper allowance of the lining and the lower part. Turn the lining this way. Then sew on the allowance of the zipper, but not on the teeth. And I'll sew and stop where I stopped sewing my zipper. As you can see, this is what I'm having. Next, I will turn my lining over up like so, then sew it with half inch. So by the time we sew it with half inch, this is how the back is going to look properly finished, and this is how our dress came out, guys. Thank you so much for watching.